Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 16, Episode 122. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us on this Monday, Steelers Nation. A very special episode to get draft week started as the 2026 NFL Draft begins this Thursday in Pittsburgh. Our annual Steelers Depot Draft Roundtable with a great group of guys who were big assets and helping the site and all of its pre-draft coverage to get you guys and ourselves ready for draft week. So we'll go through the names here in a minute, but Dave just wanted to say hello to you, and we're excited to talk to this crew of Depot guys today.
Absolutely. Draft week is finally here. Looking forward to the start of round one on Thursday night, and always excited to do a roundtable with these hardworking guys that we have, and well over 300 draft profiles again this year, and got some guys. I think we got some few first timers on the podcast as well too. So I know you'll shout them out here, but yeah, just excited for this. This should be a good show. Going to spend about an hour with these guys, getting their thoughts. People probably heard enough from Alex and myself so far, so we're going to get some additional recon and evaluations from these guys. So happy to be here.
We got Jim Hester, Josh Carney, Joe Clark, Ross McCorkle, Ryan Paglia, and Jake Brockhoff is here as well today on the roundtable. So let's kick things off and kind of talk about, and Dave and I will do a Tuesday show too to really recap Omar Khan, Mike McCarthy speaking later Monday, some of the big news over the weekend and of the day, but the big report coming out Monday morning that certainly could have draft impact on Pittsburgh is Broderick Jones, reportedly, per ESPN's Adam Schefter, suffering a setback in that neck injury and surgery that he underwent recently, and we don't know his status for the start of training camp and the regular season going forward. We'll see McCarthy and Khan clarify that later today. But Josh, I'll start with you. How does that change Pittsburgh's draft plans and how you think about where they might go in the early rounds?
Yeah, I think it changes it some. I don't know if it makes it urgent to find an offensive tackle in the first round. I know, obviously, Spencer Fano was really the only first-round offensive tackle that they had a ton of work on. And Caden Proctor's out there as well. But there just seems to be a lot of buzz about Dylan Cook and the belief in him. This is a deeper offensive tackle class. I know that there's a lot of reports out there that there's going to be a run between picks, 12 and 26 at that point. I would hope that it doesn't cause the Steelers to have to jump and change their board in that sense. But this Broderick Jones stuff is very concerning. A couple weeks ago, Omar Khan was saying things were trending in the right direction. I believe it was Brian Angelico on Friday said that he was doing good work and was moving in the right direction. So this is all very concerning, but I hope it doesn't throw their draft board off entirely, even though it is a very good offensive tackle class.
Jim, what are your thoughts when Pittsburgh might be weighing receiver, offensive line, tackle, or guard early on? Does this Jones news change the order of importance?
I think, to kind of echo off of what Josh is saying, I think it could potentially, but I don't think they've done a ton of homework on the offensive tackles, except for some more day 2, day 3 guys. And it is concerning that Jones has suffered another setback, and with necks, you just know how fragile those kind of things are. So if they didn't have somebody like Dylan Cook, who had just recently showed enough competency to hold down that position, I think it would be a lot more urgent. But at this point, I think they can afford to probably wait a little later in the draft so they don't have to reach for one in round one, unless it's a guy like Josh said with Spencer Fano, if he can fall down the board a little bit, that they could capitalize on.
Ryan, let me go to you along the same lines, and I know you didn't do the profile specifically on Spencer Fano. I think Nate Costco did it for the site there. The big talk about Spencer is, look, he's a great offensive lineman. that, regardless of where you're going to put him at position wise at the NFL level, he's somebody that you probably shouldn't bypass in the first round if you have a shot at getting him, especially if you need a tackle or a guard in this draft. What are you? And the big talk obviously is the arm length when it comes to Fano, and people wondering, can he survive at right tackle in the NFL? Obviously, the Steelers have a right tackle as things sit right now. What are you doing as a GM for the Steelers if you were to draft Spencer Fano, or would you leave him or at least start him initially at a tackle spot, maybe move Fautano over to left tackle, or are you going to make him a conversion guy and try to kick him inside?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think whenever you are considering a tackle that's being considered for a guard convert, if you're selecting that high in the draft, the aim is to always try them out at the tackle position first, see if they can make it, kind of similar to what the Patriots have done with Will Campbell. They drafted him at 4th overall. Same arm length concerns, and he flashed for a lot of the year at left tackle. I think Fano and a lot of these other guys that have these arm length concerns, the smart route would be to try them out at tackle first. That's where they've played all their life. If that doesn't work out, then guard is kind of that last resort to kind of salvage that selection. So if I were to select Fano, if he's available at that pick, I would first try him out at tackle. I'm not the biggest fan of moving Fatanu to left tackle. I think he really shined at right tackle, but I would try him out at tackle first and then move him to guard if that situation doesn't work out.
All right, I'll take one more tackle question here. This one will be for Joe Clark. Look, they haven't brought in a lot of tackles now. They did go to the Georgia Pro Day there, and Freeling obviously was there, so I guess he has to be into consideration should he drop down that far. Perhaps maybe the Steelers trade up, but let's suppose that the Steelers stay away from tackle in the first round. The other two tackles that they have brought in that are not first round prospects are Markel Bell out of Miami and Travis Burke out of Memphis. Do you have a preference? Both those guys could go around the same point in this draft. It feels like both of them are kind of hulking big individuals. Do you have a favorite of the two based on where and taking into account maybe value of when they're going to come off the board?
Yeah, I like Bell a lot. He's a guy that I think me and Ross have talked about on the podcast a decent amount because I've kind of when Broderick Jones' injury right after the combine and when Omar Khan was a little more uncertain, I was kind of on the board that the Steelers should try to take a developmental guy in the middle rounds, especially when you consider that, Dylan Cook's contract's up after this year. The Steelers likely aren't going to pick up Broderick Jones' option. So you have Cook, he flashed last year. And if Jones returns, you have pieces in place that you can get by at tackle this year, but the future gets a lot more murky. And I think Bell is a guy that just has a ton of raw traits to work with. And, you get him in Jim's camp and to help develop him. He's a player that I really like to potentially be, a future starter of the position. Needs a lot of work, probably isn't going to be a guy you're going to get a lot out of year one, but I really like that idea of taking somebody like him that you can just kind of a big ball of clay that you can mold into making, potentially a very, very talented offensive tackle in the future. So I've been a big fan of Bell. So out of those two, he's a guy that I would probably have a slight preference over on Burke.
Let me go one more to Ross McCorkle here real quick. Ross, if this team were to, let's say they had to trade up slightly into the middle of the first round to get a tackle, who are you aiming for there? Are you going after Freeling, or is there someone else you could see them going up to go get to play left tackle?
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at pure left tackle, it's tough because most of the top tackles in this class happen to play a lot of right tackle in college. And so your options, if you really don't want to have to get into the projection game of moving guys, is Monroe Freeling, Caden Proctor, Caleb Lomu. I mean, Lomu I don't think's ready for year one. So if you're looking for a year one
kind of guy, which is what you would be doing in the first round, I don't really look at Lomu as an option, and especially if you're talking about a trade up. So, yeah, I mean, Monroe Freeling, Caden Proctor, if you're looking for a year one starting left tackle, I mean, I think moving up for either of those might be a little bit rich. Maybe Freeling more likely than the other. But, I mean, I think Fano, I'm a little higher on Fano to be able to play left tackle. I mean, he did it his first year before being moved to the right side for Lomu there at Utah. And so he's someone I view as potentially being able to play, all 5 positions. And so if I were to move up, Fano would be my guy.
Ross, to stick with you, had the Broderick Jones news not come out today, I'm sure our discussion this morning would be about wide receiver and who Pittsburgh could take. They're going to draft a receiver early, just a matter of how early and, of course, who. What are your thoughts on the leading candidates there? And do you have any personal favorites? I think you're a Casey Concepcion guy, but tell me who you think fits.
Yeah, the answer in terms of what I would do and what the Steelers seem to be leaning towards are 2 different things. I was pretty bummed that they didn't bring in Casey Concepcion for a pre-draft visit. Not that that completely rules him out, but it seems less likely. I do think Concepcion fits what they need. They have the big bodies. They have the guys who can, Michael Pittman can do combat catches. DK Metcalf's more of a deep guy. Casey Concepcion, somebody who can get open in a hurry. He's a yards after the catch guy. He's sudden. The big knock is his hands, obviously. But if you look at the tape, it's more concentration issues than just having bad hands. There's plenty of examples of him having great hands. And even in combat catch situations, like his contested catch rate is perfectly fine for a guy who had as many drops as he does. His issue is kind of getting ahead of himself, turning into a ball carrier before he secures the ball. And, that isn't without a benefit. He is extremely effective at making people miss and gaining extra yards because he has that kind of extra gear of his brain's maybe thinking ahead of time. I guess there's positives and minuses to that for him. I do view Concepcion as a guy who, if the game slows down for him and those drops kind of go away a little bit, he might be, to me, the best receiver in this class. So that's my guy. But in terms of the way I think the wind's blowing for Pittsburgh, I mean, if you're talking about a potential, the way things are going here in the last week of the draft, it seems like tackles are going to be at a premium in the first round because after those first 7 tackles, things fall off a cliff. And if that happens, you're talking about maybe receivers getting pushed down. And at that point, is a guy like Mekhi Lemon going to be sitting there in the mid-teens? That could be interesting to me for a lot of the same reasons I just said for Concepcion. He's not nearly as explosive, but perhaps a little bit more precise with his routes. He definitely has more dependable hands. I think he's more ready to immediately make an impact in the slot for Pittsburgh. So Mekhi Lemon, to me would be the ideal choice, but the Steelers, if you're talking about wanting that Mike McCarthy big receiver, I mean, Denzel Boston or kind of waiting until the second round, a guy like Jeremy Bernard, somebody that fits that kind of mold is the way I'm thinking.
Ryan, just to zoom out, how do you think about how Pittsburgh should approach the wide receiver class? It's a good pool, maybe not quite as blue chippy at the top as past classes, but there's a lot of depth. So is Pittsburgh wiser? And I know it's harder to answer these things in a vacuum, but is Pittsburgh wiser to wait until day 2 and take advantage of the depth in the class, or should they get one of those top guys in the first round?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, this receiver class doesn't have the same blue chip names as years past. I think the only way they should consider a first round receiver is with a trade up, possibly for like a Mekhi Lemon. Other than that, the smarter route would be to wait to day 2, just because that's where really the depth and the heart of the class is. They could settle for, like Ross had mentioned, a Jeremy Bernard. They could get a Skylar Bell, probably top of the 3rd round. There's Antonio Williams. There's a lot of great receivers that kind of fit the mold of what they kind of need from that slot position if Michael Pittman and DK Metcalf are handling the outside duties. And so I wouldn't force a selection on day 1. I know a lot of Steeler fans are hoping for kind of that splashier selection, but unless there's a trade up for a top guy, I wouldn't force the selection.
Jim, any non-day one receivers you really like? And you wrote the reports on the guy that Ryan just mentioned, Antonio Williams, and also Ted Hurst from Georgia State, who's really helped himself throughout this pre-draft process. So tell us more about those guys.
Yeah, I really like Antonio Williams. I mean, he is one of the best separators in this class right off the line of scrimmage. He's got a great release package. He's fast enough to at least keep you honest down the field. He is tough as nails. He's a try hard blocker, but he's not as great as that at some other candidates. I really like Ted Hurst as a developmental upside kind of take a swing at guy. He reminds me a lot of Michael Gallup of the Cowboys. I know some people think he's a lot like George Pickens, and I can see it. He just doesn't have the route tree diversity, and neither did George. But that's a guy you could take a chance on, maybe on day two. Another guy I really like a lot that grew on me the more I watched him was Deshaun Stribling out of Ole Miss. A guy that he does a lot of things really well. I wouldn't say he has an elite trait at any one specific skill, but he's a really good route runner. He's very good at contested catch situations. He's an excellent blocker. He's probably one of the best in the draft class, just in my opinion. But those are some of the guys I really like. Chris Brazel, the second, I really like too, but he has some off the field concerns that I'm not sure if I want to be the team to take a chance on that unless it's maybe closer to the end of day two, early day three. Um, yeah, those are some of the guys I really like. I like the Texas Tech kid, Virgil. He interests me on day three if he makes it there. So those are some of the guys I like.
Joe, this Steelers organization, the last time they drafted a wide receiver in the first round was 2006 with Santonio Holmes at 25th overall. Prior to that, you have to go back, I believe, to Plaxico Burress in 2000 at 8th overall. And then the year before that, the Troy Edwards pick out of Louisiana Tech at 13th overall. So we're talking, what, 26 years since this team has taken a wide receiver in the top, what we say, 21st picks overall of the draft. Is this related to, is the reason behind that just happenstance of where this team has been drafting since, say, the Plaxico Burress, Troy Edwards years, or do you think there is some organizational philosophy about wide receivers in the first round unless they get a gift, say, into the, past number 20th overall? Do you have a theory on any of that? Is it just happenstance?
Yeah, I lean more towards it just being happenstance and a matter of, under Kevin Colbert, this team was really solid at hitting on some of their mid-round, even later round receiver picks. I mean, obviously Antonio Brown in the sixth. You talk about Emmanuel Sanders, Mike Wallace in the third round. So they were able to, even Martavis Bryant, they're able to find some gems in the middle rounds and guys that became really productive receivers for them. Now, maybe that then lended towards the organizational philosophy, thinking they can maybe find some of these contributors later in the draft. Recently, I mean, you haven't really hit on Roman Wilson. There hasn't have has been as much success when you're looking at some of these middle round receivers. So I would think then if there was an organizational philosophy, maybe then you reverse course and it changes. Although I mean, if you look at who the pre-draft visitors were this year, you really only brought in the two first round type receivers in Mekhi Lemon and Denzel Boston, and the rest of those guys were more middle and late round selection. So, I do lean towards it more being happenstance, but I could definitely see where, in the head of the organization, it doesn't make as much sense to take a first round receiver. Although I think, given the way that their last few drafts have gone at attacking the position, that maybe they should reconsider.
Next question, Ross. There a lot of conversation the closer you get to the draft about valued positions, first round, specifically when it comes to potential fifth-year options and premium positions related to the fifth-year option, price tag. Tackles, guards, and centers are all lumped into the same group as offensive linemen. So, regardless of the position that you take there, tackles are normally perceived as the higher value because of related to the fifth year option amount. Obviously, a lot of attention to Vega out of Penn State here because he's not technically a premium position when it comes to fifth round options. And, there are obviously a couple of tackles who are. There's wide receivers that you could justify because of the premium position that they play there. Should teams focus too highly on that, or do in other words, should teams be worried about whether or not a player, uh, can even make it to the fifth year option decision, specifically with the Steelers? Because look, we haven't seen this team, and it doesn't look like they're going to pick up the fifth year option on Broderick Jones. Are you just more worried about getting a solid player that that you think that you can get 4 or 5 good years out of, and worry about the fifth year option decision later? Or should any of that matter specifically to a team like the Steelers, who traditionally pick after the first 15 picks in the first round?
I don't want to say it completely doesn't matter, but I think the main focus is making sure you get a talent you believe in the first round. You can't afford to miss. The Steelers have had too many misses, though not so much recently, but over the last 10 years or so, there have been quite a few first round misses. So the focus needs to be finding a player who can contribute for those 4 years and, hopefully earn a second contract. The fifth year option is kind of secondary to that. And positional value, I guess, does matter. But if you're talking about a guy like Venga Ioane, you kind of talk about the perfect marriage of best player available and at a position of need. And that's what I view Venga Ioane as. After Isaac Seumalo's departure in free agency, the Steelers really do need a left guard. They have a Brock Hoffman and Spencer Anderson that can compete for that position, but I don't know that I view either of them as kind of a slam dunk starting option so much as maybe backup options. And Venga Ioane, is definitely a guy in a class where there might only be 12, 13, 14 true first round grade type of players. He's one of those guys who has a true first round grade. And so if he makes it to you, or maybe it's pick 18 or whatever, and there's a team ahead of you that needs a guard, you might trade up a little bit to get a guy like that, even just because, again, perfect marriage of position of need and best player available.
Josh, let's talk quarterback. And here we are again talking quarterback and trying to wade through who could be a potential option for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Are there any quarterbacks that you really like? I know Pittsburgh has brought in 4 of them, most fitting that quote unquote AFC North mold of guys who are big and strong and played in the elements. Do any quarterbacks make sense for Pittsburgh in the draft?
Yeah, I think Drew Aller makes some sense. I know that that's going to upset some people. He obviously had a rough time at Penn State the last few years, but, when you look at the quarterback position, you're trying to bet on traits there, and he's got great size, great arm. He has some mobility. Yes, he does shrink in some big games, but looking back at the last 2 years at Penn State, I don't think some of the play calling in some of those big games under James Franklin helped offensively. But I do like him having, a chance to reset, rehabbing from the injury, getting a chance to really get in front of NFL teams again and kind of rebuild his stock. And if you could get that guy late third round, maybe with that last compensatory pick there in the third round, you just try and develop him. Another guy is Cole Payton. There was that report last week that the Steelers were a little frustrated. There wasn't as much athleticism at the quarterback position in this draft class. Well, there's one guy that has it. He's a very raw passer, but I think he could add something immediately as a runner and some design packages, kind of like what they tried to do with Justin Fields a couple years ago. We'll see if Mike McCarthy would even entertain that, but that's kind of what you're betting on there with Cole Payton. And then the other guy I like that I think makes a lot of sense for them as far as the experience, is Carson Beck, a guy that can be had late third round, early fourth round. I know there are some concerns about the arm strength coming back from the elbow injury he suffered at Georgia. There were times last year in the college football playoff with Miami where it just looked like the ball died on him down the field. But he's further removed from that surgery, has a chance to try and build up some of that arm strength again, and the Steelers have shown a ton of interest in him. So those are kind of the three names there that I think make the most sense for them. I do think Taylon Green out of Arkansas is kind of that wild card. A guy that he's been productive at various levels. He started out at Boise State, had some good years at Arkansas. He's that uber athletic guy that can really do a lot of damage on the ground, but is still very raw as a passer. I think that just fits what the Steelers need. If Aaron Rodgers comes back, he's obviously going to be your starter. You're trying to develop Will Howard as maybe that number two, and maybe he gets some starts late in the year. But with that third quarterback, I think you want to go the developmental route. So again, it's Cole Payton, it's Taylon Green, it's Drew Aller. But if you want that experienced backup, if Rodgers doesn't come back, it's Carson Beck.
Joe, does it even make sense for Pittsburgh to consider any mid-round quarterback? One other notable thing this weekend, Art Rooney II, pretty transparently saying quarterback probably not the pick in round one. Not exactly shocking news, but still confirmation from the owner. So if you draft a mid-rounder, what would be the plan? Is there an odd man out? Does this make sense for Pittsburgh to approach it with a third, fourth round pick?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think it does. I mean, it really depends on how much they like a guy. If you're taking a guy that, just to take a quarterback, if you don't really think he can become something, then obviously I would pass. But, if they really like Drew Aller, a guy that, I mean, he was a guy that was the first round pick on a lot of boards last year. I do think if they take one and Aaron Rodgers comes back, then you kind of have to consider Mason Rudolph as potentially the odd man out, given what the organization has said about Will Howard. But I mean, if this organization is really high on Will Howard, they would have to take somebody that I think that they think could end up being better than him or is currently better than he is right now. And given the work they've done on some of these quarterbacks, I think it's something that they're at least considering and they at least might believe in some case here. So I do think it would make sense because I mean, this team has struggled for the last, I don't know, 6 years to try to find their, franchise quarterback. And if there's a guy that you think maybe could develop into that, then you're gonna be doing a disservice by passing on them.
Let's see who hasn't answered in a while. Jake, I think. Mike McCarthy said several weeks ago, when talking about Will Howard, the biggest thing with Will, and it's probably consistent with young quarterbacks, you got to win from the pocket. At the end of the day, 9 or 10 games a year are going to come down to the 2-minute drill. That's what the stats tell you. That's the way we train. So his ability to win from the pocket, because I think he has everything else. Obviously went on to say a few other things about Will Howard. But I guess what I want to do is I want to take that quote about winning from the pocket and transpose it over to these mid-round guys, specifically the ones that the Steelers have brought in for the pre-draft visits, of which there's 4 quarterbacks here. Which one of those 4 quarterbacks that the team has brought in best fits that kind of description that Mike McCarthy gave about winning from the pocket?
Yeah, so it might be an unpopular opinion, but I actually think it might be Carson Beck. He's a guy where, especially at Miami, when there's pressure in his face, things with his mechanics would start to go awry a little bit, and he would look a little bit flustered. But when he has the receiving help and he has good protection, I actually really liked his mechanics. I thought they were mostly consistent. He does need to work on looking defenders off with his eyes more and just not putting the ball in harm's way as much in general. But I do think if he has protection, I think out of those 4, he might be the most consistent working from the pocket.
Ryan, same question for you, but in addition to that, how much should we take from that quote from Mike McCarthy about winning from the pocket when talking about Will Howard as it relates to possibly a quarterback in this draft class?
I think, it's an even balance because I'm also taking into account I do believe that they are frustrated by the lack of mobility from the quarterback position in recent years. Obviously, from your quarterback, you expect them to win from the pocket first and foremost. Um, I'd weigh it pretty heavily. I also do like Carson Beck. I'm not the biggest fan of him. I think that elbow issue is, may hurt him if he never fully regains the arm strength that he had prior. Um, I do like Drew Aller. I know a lot of fans like him as well. I know he's very inconsistent, but they brought Mike McCarthy in to do one thing, and that's to develop a quarterback, and there might not be a quarterback worth developing in this class than Drew Aller with those skill sets. I know they showed interest in Taylor Green. I don't particularly see him as someone that will consistently win from the pocket. Uh, Cole Payton, same deal. He's just very raw in his passing mechanics. He's just gonna need a complete retune of his lower body mechanics. And yeah, out of the quarterbacks that they've showed interest in, I'd say Drew Aller's probably the one that's worth the most consideration.
Jim Hester, of these 4 quarterbacks that the Steelers have brought in, if you're the GM and I'm Art Rooney the second, and I'm telling you, you have to draft one of these guys. Which one is on your which one is highest on your list?
I think the guy that kind of blends the best of the developmental upside and has the capability to work those quick game concepts in the intermediate portion of the field is probably Aller. And that would be my pick if I were going to be the GM. But I am not sure that I would feel comfortable taking him until probably at least the 4th round because of his difficulties off platform, the marriage between his feet and his eyes, and just how well he deals with pressure in general. But that would probably be my number one guy. If I was the GM in charge, that's probably who I would take out of all the prospects that they have looked at.
Who's number 2 on your list?
Number 2 for me would be Cole Payton, just because I think there's a lot of athletic upside and he can do a lot of the mobility work that they like. And he has shown some good tape this past year at North Dakota State. But I mean, he is, if not a bigger project than Aller, he's a project himself because he's got a lot of erratic tendencies from his throwing motion to his processing. But I like the upside, and it's enough to bet on. And Taylor Green would probably be my third. I know you didn't ask me that. But I really like him. Carson Beck, he's kind of more of that, he can function in your offense, but I don't think he's going to win you games. I think he's just going to be a very safe player as far as managing a system, but I just don't see a lot of upside with him. And when the weather gets cold in the AFC North games, I really worry about that lack of velocity and arm strength with him in general, even if he does show um, some NFL concepts from his past couple years between Georgia and Miami. He just worries me.
Jim, let's go to tight ends, and Pittsburgh has a solid top 2 in Darnell Washington, Pat Freiermuth, but they have shown interest in adding somebody else to that mix. You wrote the report on Michigan's Marlon Klein, who came in for a visit with Pittsburgh. So tell us about Klein, maybe some good mid-round tight ends.
Yeah, I really like Klein. I think he has a lot of capability to give you that perfect bridge between Freiermuth and Washington to function as that inline blocker, but has enough athleticism and lateral agility, twitchiness to evade guys. And he's a good special teams player. I really like his toughness that he showed too when meeting offensive tackles or guys when he had to pull as a blocker. I think he has a lot of upside. Joe Royer out of Cincinnati is another guy that I like in the mid rounds. I'm glad they brought in Kaczmarek from Ohio State, who I think is just an absolute glass eater of a tight end that would love to knock your teeth out if he had the chance. And he has some receiving capabilities too. I like him. If they're looking for more of that tight end fullback hybrid, I really like Nowakowski. Out of it, I believe that's Indiana.
Yep.
He's a really nice player. There's some guys in the middle to back half of this draft that can really give you some value, if not becoming a potential second tight end, at least give you some really good um, break glass in case of emergency special teams player value that I think can be really helpful for this offense especially after losing, Hayward.
Sure. Jim, I know you have to get out of here a couple minutes early, so let me just ask you, and I'll ask you guys at the end of the podcast, predict Pittsburgh's first round pick, even if it's a trade up, trade down, and they stay at 21. Who will be the pick Thursday night?
I believe that the pick will be Vega Ioane.
Okay, and that's just for the talent winning out and the need. What's kind of the reason on him?
Yeah, so I think will be the talent just will be too hard to pass up. They have a glaring need at left guard. I like Spencer Anderson, but if you're talking about a long-term starter, I just don't see that level of upside to him. And Vega gives you just about anything you want as a left guard. They're going to have a young quarterback sooner or later, hopefully sooner, that they're going to need to protect. And he would absolutely jumpstart the running game on that left side, especially when you have young tackles like Jones and Cook and whoever else they bring in there. I just think to have a stability force multiplier like him there is going to be the guy that's the highest value, just because I think some of those top wide receivers will be gone. I think the tackles will be gone because there'll be a run on them. So he would be my prediction.
All right, there you go. So, Jim, thank you so much. You did a great job. You wrote, I think, 45 or so scouting reports for the site. We really appreciate that, and thank you for your time. Ross, let me go to you and stick with tight end. Just one more question. The beat guys have done some of this, I'm not saying, but I'm just saying, on Kenyon Sadiq out of Oregon, widely believed to be the first tight end drafted and likely in the first round. May not make it to Pittsburgh, but guys like Jerry Dulac, Mark Paglia hinted if he's there, Pittsburgh would take him. If so, what's the rationale for that? And is this a likely possibility or just draft smoke?
Yeah, and I think even Jerry Dulac, who was leading the charge on that, eventually came back and did not include him in his list of potential first round picks. So he even seems to be backing off from that. I mean, I don't necessarily hate the idea, again, just from like a best player available type of perspective. And this, if the Steelers truly do want additional receiving help, he more or less is just a big body receiver, which is what Mike McCarthy said, he kind of likes anyways in terms of his wide receivers. So if you just kind of view him as a wide receiver, it makes more sense. And honestly, that's kind of what he is right now. So I wouldn't hate the idea of drafting Sadiq in the first round. I just, I think that there's other positions that probably should take priority. And with the tight end class being as deep and talented as it is, for my money, I'm targeting guys in like the third round, Sam Roush, or there's a whole lot of them. I think there's guys that you could find all the way until like the sixth, seventh round that at least have a skill set that can be used on Sunday. So Sadiq's intriguing. I get the buzz. I get, a guy who's breaking records at the combine's always going to pique interest, but for my money, probably not the way I would go.
All right, let's switch gears and go to a different position here. The Steelers have looked at quite a bit of off-the-ball linebackers so far in their pre-draft visits. This is a reasonably good enough class at the off-the-ball linebacker position. It's been said by many draft nicks that even if you don't need an off-the-ball linebacker this year, you should probably draft one because it is such a deep class overall. Josh, I'm going to go to you because I know you're a Pitt fan on top of being a Steelers fan. I know you watch them throughout the season kind of religiously. What and who is Kyle Lewis, and how does he fit specifically in the Steelers defense should the team wind up drafting him?
I think that's the $1,000,000 question with Kyle Lewis is what is he? A lot of people have said he could stick it off ball linebacker. I think he can. I think he's kind of that new age guy that can play all three downs, but there's been a lot of talk that he could be, a slot corner type player, one of those hybrid safety type players. Um, I think he would fit very well in Pittsburgh and would give that guy that sub package linebacker that would pair really well next to Peyton Wilson moving forward. I did have him in my final mock draft in the third round at 75 or 76 overall. I can't remember the exact number there, but he's a guy that all he did at Pitt was make plays. Whether it was coming downhill defending the run, he made a ton of plays in coverage. I think he had over 250 snaps in the slot this past season in coverage. So he's just a versatile chess piece. I know there's some concerns about the size. He's under 6 foot. He's only 220 pounds, but the athleticism is off the charts. And I think when you are looking for a linebacker in today's game, you want an athlete that can handle all the rules. He can stay on the field all three downs. He can handle, some of the green dot stuff, getting everybody lined up. And that is Kyle Lewis. I think you bet on traits like that at the position. And he plays a physical style too. So that's a guy that I really, really like for the Steelers and think would make a ton of sense to just have him change sides of the facility moving forward.
Ryan, I'll go to you. I know you didn't do the scouting report on him, but what are your observations of Kyle Lewis, and can he kind of be an F eraser, if you will, in the Steelers defense?
Sure. I mean, I liked Kyle Lewis. He was one of the first people that caught my eye watching uh, past college football season. I did some work for him before I started doing some work for the Depot, and I think as a pure like coverage linebacker, he's probably one of, if not the best. I mean, his movement is just so fluid. He's one of the rangiest linebackers in this class. Whether he has the strength to hold up on a three down basis at that second level is to be determined. He is on the smaller side, but as an F eraser, I mean, I don't think you could get much better in this class just being from a pure coverage standpoint.
Jake, if this team were to draft a off the ball linebacker in the middle rounds, let's say starting in round 3, who should be on the board? Who do you have your eye on that best fits the Steelers, from the middle rounds on for this team?
The one guy I really like out of Michigan is Jayshon Barham. He did get a lot of reps at edge later in his last year in college, so I'm not exactly sure where teams might want him to play in the NFL. But from the middle rounds, I really like him. He's very athletic, really quick in short spaces, good overall top end speed. He's got a really good frame for the linebacker position. Very smart against the run, very good at filling gaps. Um, he can kind of play all over the defense. He got a lot of snaps at edge. When I was doing his scouting report, he even had some snaps at nickel, which I don't think I would do at a high level in the NFL, obviously, but he can play in a lot of different places. He's naturally strong, very athletic, just a lot of good traits that I think you want to have if you're looking for a guy towards the middle rounds, like maybe early day 3, late day 2. I think with his traits, he would make a lot of sense.
Ross, do you think this team and do you think they will, and do you think they should select an off the ball linebacker at some point during this draft class? And are you looking for someone that can play more downhill, or are you looking for someone that can be an F eraser, or are you looking for someone that can be maybe a little bit of both in addition to maybe helping out on special teams?
I do think they should draft an off-ball linebacker primarily because if it's not going to be an immediate need this year, it definitely will be next year. And why not take advantage of the strong class? I think the Steelers have kind of told us what they are after in terms of, you look at the profile of the pre-draft visitors they brought in, almost all of them are hyper athletic. Some of them play kind of multiple positions, more of a hybrid type of player. I think all of them except for Duggar are under 6'2". You got a lot of undersized guys that they're looking at. I think Duggar's more like a 6'4" type of guy, but everybody else is like in that 6'1" range. Not necessarily undersized in terms of their weight, but in terms of their height, yes. And a lot of them are, hyper athletic. You look at like the Harold Perkins of their pre-draft visit list, and even guys like Jack Kelly later in the draft. Intriguing guy. Played edge a lot early in his career. He was a champion BMX biker and kind of brings that competitive edge into the way he plays football. A good athlete. He can kind of do a little bit of everything, but definitely needs more development. Perkins, to me, is the most interesting if you're not taking one early. I think I had in my mock draft, I did have Jacob Rodriguez early. I think he's the guy I absolutely would want. He's my biggest draft crush here. But if you're going late, Harold Perkins is interesting to me. Just because he has some, obviously crazy to mention him in the same sentence as Micah Parsons. However, I'm going to do that for a second, just because Mike McCarthy had a guy like that in Dallas that he had so much success with. One of these kind of positionless. He can rush the passer. He can play off ball. He can really just be moved around and cause havoc all throughout the front seven and even outside of that for the defense. And I think Harold Perkins, being the freak athlete that he is, can accomplish some of those things, albeit it's going to take a little bit of development. He's definitely more of a project than some others.
Jake, let's move to cornerback. Were you surprised that Pittsburgh has shown as much interest in the position as they have pre-draft? They brought in 4 for visits. That tied second most of any position, only behind wide receiver. And any cornerbacks that you think make a lot of sense for Pittsburgh in either day 1 or day 2?
Yeah, I don't think it's too surprising given, obviously the situation with Aaron Rodgers. And they're going to want to bring a 4th quarterback into camp anyway.
I was saying cornerback, CB.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
cornerback,
I'm
my
not,
fault.
yeah, you're
My
good.
apologies. So first and second day cornerbacks, you said?
Yeah, Pittsburgh obviously showed a lot of interest. They brought in 4, Malik Muhammad, the Washington kids, Chris Johnson. Any reason for showing that much interest? When you sign Jamel Dean, you bring back Asante Samuel Jr., you have Porter, and do any of those cornerbacks kind of strike you?
Yeah, I'm a really big fan of Chris Johnson. I think he's a really good player. He's one of my favorite players in this entire class, and I think in general, just they did bring in Jamel Dean, and they do have somebody at nickel already, and Brandon Eccles, even if some aren't sure if he's really a starting caliber player. But injuries kind of took a toll on the position last year. You saw them have to go and get midseason signings like Asante Samuel Jr. So I think when you have 12 draft picks, if you really like a guy, and I think like someone again like Johnson, and really all of the guys that they brought in, I'm pretty high on. So it makes a lot of sense to me. And I think it's one of those spots that you can never really have too much depth at.
Mm-hmm. Joe, to go to you to look at corner, and then we'll throw safety into that mix as well. Which position should be more important for Pittsburgh to address, corner or safety, and any safety prospects that you like a lot?
Yeah, I would definitely go with safety just because you look at, Jaquan Brisker's on a 1-year deal, no money remaining on Deshaun Elliott's contract after this, no guaranteed money. And who knows how he's going to be coming off an injury. It was a, pretty gruesome injury. So, in a safety class where there's a lot of high-end talent, I would think that addressing safety would be pretty important. Early in the draft, I like Emmanuel McNeil-Warren. I like Dylan Tiedemann. I don't necessarily think they're going to be Pittsburgh's first round pick at this point, although McNeil-Warren did come in for a pre-draft visit. Second round, AJ Halsey's a guy that, kind of rangy that I'm a big fan of. And then later in the draft, another pre-draft visitor, Jacoby Thomas. He just, they had 5 interceptions last season, can kind of take away a lot of those vertical deep routes. And I think he plays the run pretty well. So he's a guy that I kind of have my eye on, maybe in the 4th. Maybe he falls to the 5th. That would be ideal. But he's a player that I've liked what I've seen out of him. And I definitely think addressing safety in this class is something the Steelers should look to do, given where they're at with, the future of their position group there, especially, Jalen Ramsey's not getting any younger either.
Mm-hmm. Ryan, similar question to you. Any cornerbacks or safeties that you really like in this year's draft that you think will fit Pittsburgh's scheme?
Yeah, cornerback I think is a pretty deep class. Doing the reports, I felt like the deeper I got in the pool, the more I liked it. I said it in my mock drafts, but I think Malik Muhammad out of Texas is probably my biggest draft crush. I don't know what it is about him, but I just, outside of his size, which he has a slight slender frame, I can't find much faults to his game. I think he could play boundary. I think he could play nickel. Uh, he's very fluid out of his back pedal. His click and close ability is, instant. Um, he is a bit grabby at the top of his route, but I feel like most college corners are. They over rely on their athleticism, but that could be easily coached out of them. In terms of safeties, I did the reports on Kamari Ramsey and Bishop Fitzgerald out of USC. I think they're both high quality players. Ramsey's got experience as a safety and in the nickel. I think he's kind of that chess piece that you can move all over the back end of the defense. I think he'd be a very solid fit there. He's very aggressive coming downhill against the run. Bishop Fitzgerald's more of that kind of rangy safety in the back end that is more that prototypical ball hawk. He just always seems to have a nose for the football and be around the football. I think those are two really good players that would fit into the Steelers scheme. Trying to think of other ones. I know this past weekend I did a report on DeCarlos Nicholson from USC as well. A lot of USC guys, but I know the Steelers have, especially with Joey Porter Jr., they're favoring more length. DeCarlos Nicholson is very, very lengthy. I mean, he's almost 6'3" with, I can't remember exactly. I think it was like 33-inch arms, but he's very lengthy. He gets his hands into the receiver's pocket. Very high pass deflection numbers. Just not very. Doesn't really turn those pass deflections into interceptions, but he's a former quarterback convert that is still learning the position. But I think if he fine tunes his technique and kind of grows into his body as a corner, I think he'll be a very solid player as well.
Let's go. Too bad Jim Hester isn't with us still, because he did the scouting report on Tradan Stukes out of Arizona. He ended up being technically, I guess, number 30 on our list of pre-draft visitors overall. Worked out with the safeties during the combine. Kind of a F eraser, real. Depends on what he played outside. He played free safeties, played in the box and all. Josh. Who is Tradan Stukes, and how does he fit into the Steelers defense? And are there any worries about him being one of the older players in this class, but yet one of the probably the more experienced guys, and obviously seems to be a strong character guy on top of him? And I think our own Jim Hester, has him down as a draft grade as a 7.8, a late day 2, early day 3 kind of player. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do, and I think he does fit the Steelers' defense. Again, you're looking for versatility in the secondary. Obviously, they have Jalen Ramsey that can kind of handle that, but really where Stukes plays in the NFL, I think he's probably better fit at safety, but he can handle some of those cornerback duties. Just a great athlete. I'm not really worried about the age at this point. I think you're just going to see that for a few years, with NIL, and, this is, I think, the last class coming off of some of the COVID stuff. It may have been last year, but you're seeing a lot of older prospects in this class. It doesn't concern me as much at all. I want some of the guys with the experience, but yeah, he's a 3-year captain. Guys have raved about him, coaches and former teammates in college. And the one thing I really like about him is he didn't have many penalties over the last few years. I think in Dane Brugler's The Beast Guide, his last penalty was in 2023. So this is a guy that can move all over, wear a bunch of different hats, great athlete, plays a physical style. It would not shock me if he gets into the first round discussion on Thursday night there in the back half. Yeah, I think he's a very good fit for the Steelers. And if he were on the board in the second round, I would race that selection card up there, because he's a guy that could step in and do a lot under Patrick Graham.
Joe, is there a couple of cornerbacks in this class, 2 or 3 of them, that you'd be banging the table for the Steelers draft? More true outside cornerbacks that you'd be banging the table for?
Yeah, I don't think he's gonna be there in the second round, but I do like Chris Johnson a lot. I just think he's a player that kind of does everything at a pretty high level. Type of guy that, makes plays on the ball. He fits what the Steelers have been looking for at quarterback. Um, Outside of that, there's not really anybody that I think I'd really bang the table for, just because I do think the Steelers are in a decent spot at quarterback right now, and I think, at least especially early in the draft. There's other needs that I think they should probably look to address, beef up some depth elsewhere. But I do like Johnson a lot as a player. And I think I don't think there's any chance he's there in the second round, but if he is, I think that would be a fantastic selection.
Let's go to defensive line real quick. Not a huge need overall. You can make some arguments that the Steelers should look for a true, someone that they can get some snaps out of as a true nose potentially later in this draft. So far, the two notable guys that they have brought in, they are prototypical size, weight, speed, kind of later round day 3 prospects in James Thompson Jr. out of Illinois and Darrell Jackson Jr. out of Florida State. Ross, I'm going to ask you this. If the Steelers draft a defensive lineman at any point during the 2026 NFL draft, will the name be either James Thompson Jr. or Darrell Jackson Jr.? And if your answer is no to that, but yet you still think they're going to draft a position player on the defensive line, who would that be? And you can answer that regardless on top of it, I guess.
Yeah, I didn't end up having any defensive linemen in my final mock. I did in some of the other ones, but I if they do draft one, I think those are the two most likely, but I could also see them grabbing like a space eater, like a Dominic Orange or Tim Keenan from Alabama, some of those guys who are true kind of, run stopping, two gapping guys in the middle there. Um, Keenan in particular is interesting to me just because the Steelers haven't had a player like that in a while. And a lot of people argue, well, that position's dead in the NFL. But I mean, look what's been happening to the Steelers on run defense over the last few years. And look at the way offenses are trending with getting bigger bodies on the field. How do you counter that? You get a big guy in the middle. The 3-4 defense for years was kind of powered by having that Hampton type in the middle there. And the Steelers haven't really prioritized that in quite a while. So I kind of like, for my money, I would prioritize getting one of those kind of big guys who, even if they're just a 2-down player, great. Have them do that really well, and I think it could pay off for the defense. Tim Keenan is kind of my favorite in that mold.
Go ahead, Alex.
Just to start wrapping things up here, I want to go down the line before we get your predictions for who Pittsburgh will take in the first round and some final questions. Give me one prospect that is your draft crush or your favorite. Ryan, I'll start with you. I know you mentioned Malik Muhammad as one, so give maybe your second draft crush.
There's a lot of them. I really like.
Good for you.
There's 2 off-ball linebackers. I know I wasn't asked this question earlier, but there's 2 off-ball linebackers I would pound the table for. Anthony Hill Jr., also out of Texas. I know a lot of people have had concerns about maybe kind of like a little bit of a stiffness in his lower body. I don't really see it. I mean, this is a guy that's dominated since his true freshman season. Sometimes you just don't overcomplicate it and you just take a really good football player. Another one is Jay Golday from Cincinnati, who I did the report on. And this dude's just, he's prototypical. He's 6'5". He flies around the field. Weirdly enough, Cincinnati had him as more of kind of like that overhang defender, not really in like an off ball, and he's still kind of learning the position. I believe he converted from like a defensive end, so he's still like a tick slow in his processing, but with more reps, that should, you would hope, speeds up his process a bit. But those are 2 guys that are just, if they're there in the second round, I'd run to the podium for those guys.
Joe, your draft crush? Any position, any round? Who do you like?
Yeah, it's funny because Ross asked me this the other day, and I said Jake Olday. I just I don't want to be repetitive here, but he's just kind of a monster, and it takes a lot for me to praise anybody from Cincinnati, because that's my rival school. But I mean, I started watching him ahead of the Shrine Bowl because he was supposed to go to the Shrine Bowl, and it was like his speed, his size. He's a fantastic tackler. Just a player that I think would be awesome in the middle of the Steelers defense. So that was my guy that, like, yeah, if he's there in the second round, I would take him in an absolute heartbeat. It seems like he's getting, some late first, early second round buzz now, so likely won't be there. Steelers didn't do much with him outside of a combine formal, so not expecting him to wind up with the black and gold, but it would be pretty awesome if he did.
All right, appreciate you putting the bias aside to pick him. Josh, your draft crush.
It's Vega Ioane. I love everything about him. I know that he doesn't have any dominant traits in that sense, the eye-popping testing numbers or anything like that, but he's just an old school football player that, he's just a butt kicker on the inside. He's going to be a plug and play guy. He's got Pro Bowl floor, in my opinion. Just a guy that, he was so good at Penn State the last few years on an offensive line that had a lot of questions. Took a huge step forward this year and just was really dominant. The other one I can't not mention here is Landon Robinson out of Navy. I'm hoping he doesn't land in Baltimore. That would make me genuinely sick to my stomach. But that guy, for as undersized as he is, he's arguably the strongest player in the draft class. And I think he's just going to prove a lot of people wrong at the NFL level.
Real quick,
go ahead, Dave.
before, go ahead, Alex. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to finish up the group here with Jake and your draft crush.
Okay, go ahead, Jake.
Yeah, so I'll take a little bit of a deep dive here, but I really like Daniel Sobkowitz out of Illinois State as a wide receiver. He'll definitely be a late day 3 guy, but I got to cover him during small school week, and I just loved everything he does. He's a really good red zone threat. He has very long arms. 19 touchdowns last year. A lot of those came in the red zone. He's like a great jump ball guy. He did run a 4.6 40 time out of his pro day, so that might scare teams a little bit. And his top end speed isn't incredible, but I think he plays a lot faster than that on film. He runs really good routes, knows how to find soft spots in zone coverage. He knows how to get to the sticks and turn around on third down. Really good on in breaking routes, really good length, just really good in contested catch scenarios. He has impressive body control. You don't have to worry about drops with him at all. He's also very clutch. In their playoff win against North Dakota State, he had the last 3 touchdowns, including the game winner with about 30 seconds left. So he's a guy, he definitely won't be if he is drafted by the Steelers, it won't be the first receiver for sure. But I do think when you have as many picks as they do on day 3, he's just so productive in college. And I think he could have went to a better school if he wanted to go in the transfer portal, but he wanted to stay at Illinois State. Understandably, as an FCS receiver, with how deep this class is, he's not getting a lot of draft type. But I would be really excited if the Steelers took somebody like him late on day 3.
And then Ross, to finish it up, your draft crush.
Yeah, I already talked about Concepcion. He's up there for sure. Jacob Rodriguez, I mentioned him briefly earlier. I'll just elaborate a little bit. This started at the Senior Bowl and just seeing how he directed the defense around him in that setting at the Senior Bowl where it's so difficult to pick up a new defense in just a few days. Not only was he on top of his responsibilities, but he was getting everybody else set where they need to be as a former quarterback. I think he has just a great understanding of football in general. He has a good football IQ, and he can be a force multiplier to those around him. And that's not even to mention how insane his statistics were in college. So if you add on top of it, he basically won every award in the book. It's hard not to like Jacob Rodriguez. I'll name one more, Keelan Rutledge. This is another one that I, kind of fell in love with at the Senior Bowl, primarily because he was pancaking like literally everyone on the first day. He had like 6 in the first practice, and there was a report that came out that said basically a coach had to pull him aside and say, "Hey, chill out, man. Like this is the Senior Bowl. We're not trying to get anybody hurt." They had to tell him to stop pancaking people. And anytime you have to tell somebody to do that, that's my guy. So Keelan Rutledge, he plays nasty. He's super athletic. He has the edge, competitive edge that you like at guard. And I think he would just fit the Steelers offensive line super, super well if they don't go with somebody like Venga Ioane in the first.
As far as my crushes, I guess overall goes with a slant towards what I think the Steelers are looking for and potentially drafting. It's obviously Vega, Ioane, and Omar Cooper Jr. and Jacob Rodriguez, I think, as early round guys. If you want to get into non-first round guys, Marlon Klein, the tight end out of Michigan, who the guys talked about, is definitely on my list. I like those. From day one, I've been a Mason Reiger fan out of Wisconsin, specifically since the Shrine Bowl week. Let's see who else potentially later round guys there. I think it off the top of my head. Kind of drawing a blank as far as later round guys go. I like Burke out of Memphis to tackle. I think he has a possibility of being a guy in the middle rounds if the Steelers wait till tackle as far as him. And then Robinson out of Illinois just screams Steelers, backup, maybe upside defensive lineman. So that's a quick rundown of mine. Real quick, we haven't hit on edge yet. Josh, we don't know if this team's going to draft an outside linebacker type at some point. I would imagine if you were to build a short list of day 3 candidates, Mason Reiger out of Wisconsin would be on that list. I know you got to see him at I believe the Shrine Bowl and all. Who else would be on the short list of maybe day 3 edge that fit the outside linebacker mold? What about the Logan Fano kid, the brother of Spencer Fano? Is he on that list? Do you have any other potential outside linebacker candidates day 3 potentially for the Steelers?
Yeah, I think Mason Reiger has to be on that list, especially after what he did at the Shrine Bowl. You could put a guy like Logan Fano should probably be on there. Wesley Williams out of Duke was another guy that had a fantastic Shrine Bowl week. Him and Mason Reiger were outstanding together. Those are two good athletes with some solid length that could fit. Caden Curry out of Ohio State, again, they could go back to that well. I know that he played more hand in the dirt, but that's a guy that could potentially stand up in Pittsburgh and fit. But I haven't really looked a ton at edge for the Steelers. I just didn't think it was that big of a need. But in recent weeks, there's been a lot of buzz. And one guy that could make sense in the 7th round or even as kind of an undrafted free agent with an opportunity is Patrick Payton out of LSU. Again, he was a high-end prospect entering 2025 after his transfer to LSU from Florida State. And then he went to the Shrine Bowl and did very, very little, and there's been very little buzz on him. But you're talking a guy just under 6'5", 260. He's got 34-inch arms. He had success at Florida State, and then again, kind of the bottom fell out for him at LSU. So that's a name late day 3 I'd kind of have circled as a potential fit. But Mason Reiger, you could see them going back to the Wisconsin well if they needed another pass rusher there.
All right, before Alex asks the final golden question here, let me ask each one of you, how many picks? The Steelers currently have 12 selections that they're scheduled to make. How many total picks will the Steelers wind up making in the 2026 draft? Ross, we'll start with you.
I have them down for 9.
All right. Let's go, Ryan. How many total picks will the Steelers make this year?
9 seems about right. I think they're going to package a few to trade up in the first.
All right. Josh, same question.
I'm going to stay with 10.
Who else do I have here? Joe.
I have 9.
All right. Who's left? Jake?
Yeah, I'm going to go with 10 as well.
All right. Did I miss anybody, Alex?
No,
Alex,
I think you're at
Alex
9. I'm at 10.
All right.
Wow.
I'm at 9. So there as well with the rest of the game. All right, Alex. I guess you can wrap them up here with a couple of magic questions.
Yeah, the magic question of all is who will Pittsburgh take in the first round? Let's start with Ryan because you hit us with the first round trade up prediction in that answer. So tell me who they're trading up for.
Yeah, I know in my mock draft I had them taking McNeil Warren out of Toledo, but I tried to stay away from the trades in my mock draft. Uh, I think they're gonna trade up ahead of the Ravens and take Vega Ioane.
Okay, the guard out of Penn State. Jake, your prediction. Who will Pittsburgh take in the first round, be it 21 or in a trade?
I'm gonna go with Omar Cooper Jr. I know they didn't bring him in for a pre-draft visit, but with Frank Signetti Jr. on the staff, they have their way to get information on him. I know it's a deep receiver class, but I just think he's too good of a talent to pass up. If they don't end up trading up for somebody like Vega.
Yeah, if there's an exception to that history of visits and pro days, it might be Cooper because it's Signetti and the receivers coach Adam Henry who coached Cooper in 2022 at Indiana. Josh, your prediction.
Vega Ioane out of Penn State, but I think they stay at 21. I think this is going to be a David DeCastro slide all over again, and they're going to get a great talent right there falling into their lap.
All right, I dig it. Joe, your prediction.
Yeah, I'll echo Josh. I had my mock draft Ioane at 21, and I'll stick with that. I think the guard position just might not be as valued, and I think he can certainly be on the board at number 21.
And Ross, to bring us home, your prediction of the pick in the first round.
Yeah, I have Spencer Fano, and I have a trade up into the kind of low 10, 12, 13 kind of range to get that done. That was before the Broderick Jones news this morning, and now probably even more set in stone in my mind. That's what they will do.
What are you doing? What are you doing with him, Ross? If you pick him, I know that I asked that question to a couple other guys, but what are you doing with him if he's the pick?
Yesterday, I would have told you guard year one, and we'll see what happens year two. Now it's you try him you're absolutely trying to make him your tackle year one. Whether that means trying to move Fautanu, I don't love the idea of doing that, but Fautanu did play left tackle at Washington, so I think that there's every possibility that could be the case where you move him to left and put Fano at right. I think Fano can potentially also play left too. So I'm trying to make him a year one tackle if I'm trading up for him.
I mean, he's one of the cleanest guys, other than position questions. He's one of the cleanest guys in this class, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think overall offensive lineman, I would say he's number one, and pure guard Venga. So I think I agree with what the others are saying here too.
All
right, and Dave and I will give our predictions for the Wednesday show. My mock draft drop Tuesday, which has had some rewrites after today's Broderick Jones news, and Dave's will drop on Wednesday. Dave, any final questions for the group?
No, I think we covered it overall. We appreciate all the work that you guys have put in this off season, and like I said, over 300 profiles just really speaks volumes of the amount of work and the quality of work that you guys have done. And yeah, look forward to maybe doing another one of these roundtables with the same group, and maybe a couple of more of the contributors after the draft actually takes place. So good job, everyone.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. Really appreciate all your hard work, dedication. We'll definitely do a post-draft depot roundtable. So I think from here, we'll take a pause. Dave and I will come back, just do some quick-hitting information from news of the weekend, and then we'll go from there. So we'll take a pause and come back. And welcome back to the Terrible Podcast. Our special thanks to a great group of guys for our annual Steelers Depot Roundtable. We'll definitely have one post-draft as well. So really appreciate all the hard work, especially for these scatter reports. Obviously, not one person on our team can do full reports of complete tape breakdowns on these guys for over 300 plus prospects. So the guys did a great job that has me feeling really prepared for the draft, Dave.
Yeah, absolutely, boy. When I think back in my head about Senior Bowl and coming out of the regular season of what I know, I just amazed myself and really amazed by the group of how quickly we're able to get up to speed in a matter of, I don't know, how long has it been, 12 weeks or so, give or take, based on what we're able to get done in film work, and then based on the profiles that all the guys write, you got a real good sense about the draft class, and then you marry that into the pre-draft visits, and unfortunately not a lot lot of pro day visits this time around here. I just once again, it's props to the group as a whole because you certainly can't learn about that amount of players in a shorter time if you're doing it all on your own. And I thought today's roundtable was one of the better ones that we've done over the years, and we've done some real good ones. And I do look forward to getting this group of guys and maybe a few more together after the draft to have another roundtable to go over, the selections and, maybe where they could have gone different directions in the draft as well too. So really, really excited about the way things went today in the roundtable.
I feel the same way across the board. So we're going to do just rapid fire stories of the weekend. We have Omar Khan, Mike McCarthy coming up soon. Probably you guys, by the time you listen to this, they'll have already spoken. We'll recap what they have to say for the Tuesday show. We'll do a special Tuesday show. So top story Monday day, people woke up to Adam Schefter reporting offensive tackle Broderick Jones suffered a setback in his recovery and rehab from the neck surgery that he underwent. Timetable uncertain of when he'll return, if he'll be ready for training camp for the start of the regular season. We just saw Jones working out during phase 1 of the offseason program. We heard positive news on Khan of Jones from Omar Khan, from Brian Angelico, and so we don't know exactly when this happened. I'm sure Khan McCarthy will be asked about Jones' status in this report during their presser today, but this obviously could impact Pittsburgh's plans.
Yeah, look, it's we said it was encouraging a couple of episodes ago, based on what the photos and all were surfacing out of the OTA sessions. You do kind of wonder about the timing of all this, but maybe it's legitimate that he has had a setback. Well, to say the least, something's going on there, and it will be interesting to see if Omar Khan and or Mike McCarthy are asked about that and what the nature of the answer is. Is it just kind of vague? And we'll see what happens there. Look, I don't know if this causes you to automatically shift gears and say, look, we were high on going up and maybe getting this guy trading up to now maybe, because of this, during the off season, you're making all kind of moves towards depth and all like that. But obviously the draft is a different animal when it comes to the quality of players, specifically at the tackle position. I don't think this is an overly great class when it comes to tackles. I do think if you get into round 3, there are some options. We've obviously seen them bring in the Miami kid and the Memphis kid and Burke as potential options there. They depending on how they view Fano, whether or not he's a tackle or a guard, and how high they are on him, I think does play into this some way. But other than Freeling out of Georgia, there really hasn't been a lot of really overall contact or seeming interest in the early round tackle type. So I would hate to think that you're altering your whole draft first round strategy based on maybe a recent setback by Broderick Jones, because look, even if Broderick Jones was progressing nicely, there was still going to be a lot of questions about him when it comes to 2026. So I would think that you're going along the lines of thinking, he might not be your top left tackle in 2026, and depends on how they feel about Dylan Cook and the season that he had last season, and if they do think that they could still get by with a potential upside guy like Bell or Burke in the middle rounds of this thing. So I think first and foremost, and we'll be talking about it on Wednesday, is what was the answer to a potential question about the Monday morning report about Broderick Jones and the supposed setback that he had.
Right. The question is, what does the timetable to return look like? If that's still training camp or regular season, that could mean one thing for Pittsburgh's plans. If it's going to be more uncertain than that, when they just don't know when he's going to come back, then that might heighten things. I think Dylan Cook played well last year and has a lot of promise, but this is a new coaching staff that didn't feel that. And so they're less attached to him than the coaching staff from last year would have been had they carried over and Mike Tomlin not stepped down and the staff largely remained intact. So Pittsburgh's only shown serious interest in the one potential first-round offensive tackle in Spencer Fontenot. Monroe Freeland could be an option, but it feels like there's going to be a big run on tackles right around Pittsburgh's spot, right in front of Pittsburgh's spot, around that 15 to 20 range. The tackles start going off the board. They're always valued highly because of the premium position in which they play. So will Pittsburgh have to trade up to get one of those guys? If they don't get one in round one, then where do they go from there? Because once you get into day two, that tackle group thins out in a hurry because everyone's taking the good tackles that are off the board because of that position scarcity and the value of being an NFL left tackle. So it's very interesting to see where Pittsburgh's going to go, how they approach things. And I don't know how much we'll get, but I certainly want to hear what Mike McCarthy and Omar Khan have to say about today's report.
Right. Hopefully the question is phrased in a way that we get some usable. Although they'll just say, no, we kind of wondered about his process, and more than anything, I'd just like to see if they confirm the report or not.
Right. That's the big thing. Has he suffered a setback that has impacted his timetable in some sort of meaningful way? That's what we want to hear most of all. Art Rooney II sat down with local news station WTAE for an interview a couple days ago that aired on, I think it was Friday, and Art Rooney made a pretty transparent comment saying that he doesn't know exactly what position Pittsburgh will take in the first round Thursday, but it will probably not be a quarterback. So when your owner says that, you can pretty much take to the bank it won't be a quarterback. Now, that is not the most earth-shattering news. We didn't have a lot of suspicion it was going to be a quarterback in the first place, but really confirms there is no secret smokescreen plan to draft Ty Simpson, although those with tinfoil on their heads may say this is a continued smokescreen from Art Rooney II, but I think you put all the information together, the lack of interest in Simpson. Obviously, it's not a good quarterback class at the top overall. Simpson nor any other name will be the pick at quarterback in the first round.
Yeah, you could get into semantics here, and I know several of the readers did. Probably is just that. Probably it's not a definitive, but why would you tie yourself into definitives? But look, it feels like the overarching sentiment has been for quite a while, at least for us, and not those on Get Up or ESPN or all these other talking heads. I mean, a lot of people are trying to give good and valid reasons of why the Steelers should look at a guy like Ty Simpson, but I don't think that. Look, I mean, I have come a long way, as I mentioned. I went into the offseason wondering if this team would draft a quarterback at all. I have now got to the point where I feel they will draft a quarterback at some point, but at no point have I ever been convinced that, and look, we all know Mendoza's going to go off the board with the first pick. There's no secret there. The only real question has been Ty Simpson, but at no point of this offseason pre-draft process have I really given any consideration of the Steelers drafting Ty Simpson in the first round. I suppose you could get into possibilities of if he slides into the second round and maybe potentially trading up. But I mean, if we look at what Rooney was asked about first round, specifically quarterback, he said probably not. And I really take that as it would be a huge surprise if they drafted Simpson in the first round.
If they had serious interest in Simpson and were considering him, Rooney's not going to make that comment. And even before that, he said, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, he said to the reporter, Andrew Stockey, the one thing I can tell you is we're probably not going to take a quarterback. And so he's still saying with a level of certainty that, yes, he does say probably. That's just one of those, I take it almost as a filler word. We're not going to speak in absolutes, but
right.
Very, very unlikely. It would be shocking, I think, to everyone, myself included, if Simpson was the pick. And there's no other first-round quarterback to even consider. So it's not even last year where you had the buzz on Shador and then maybe Jackson Dart. Like, at least you had two names to talk about. It's just Simpson, and they want somebody bigger. They want someone who has that quote-unquote AFC North mold, right or wrong. That seems to be their philosophy. And so Simpson does not fit that bill.
I agree.
The last piece of information was a report article from Charles Robinson on Sunday, who spoke with some NFL executives who believe the Steelers will listen and field calls on trade talks for Alex Highsmith and Nick Herbig, the outside linebacker duo. And one executive predicted that one of those guys will be traded by draft weekend. I think his inclination was Alex Highsmith. So this is probably worth a longer discussion we may save for the Tuesday or Wednesday show, but just want to at least note that's gotten a lot of buzz, and Ross's post on that blew up. The NFL world was buzzing about that latest rumor.
Look, the only way I could see them trading one of those guys would be some sort of round one trade up situation that would prevent them from coming off of maybe top 3 round draft capital to do so. When you get in a situation with Highsmith, you got quite a lot of dead money to talk about there in trading him. And then if you were just to trade those guys outright and not part of some sort of first round trade up scenario, what would you legitimately get for them? A third round pick, probably at best for either one of those guys, and it would have to be the right fit. It would have to go to a team that probably at least 3-4 base where they actually call their edges outside linebackers. And I just don't see the value in trading either one of those guys for just straight, if it's not part of some sort of first round trade up. I just can't see it. Now, of the two potentially being traded, I would probably go with Herbig because he is more of a reserve guy still at this point. I think Highsmith, I think you'd be putting yourself in a precarious position to expect Herbig to come in and play at the level on an every down snap basis, the way kind of Highsmith has been.
But he is younger.
Yeah, he is younger, but and look, I mean, once again, over the years since the day he was drafted, and he's been easy to spot on the field when he has been on the field. But I would just and look, if you did trade Highsmith, you would probably think that you're going to turn around and potentially
You would definitely extend him.
extend Herbig at that point, right? So there's a
Yeah.
lot of inside baseball minutia to go on besides that. My take overall, I can't see either one of those guys being traded. But if indeed something were to happen that one of them were traded, I would expect it to be as part of some sort of trade up in round one specifically, I think.
Yeah, I could see that because if you get back a third round pick, what is that really doing for you? You already have
Right.
3 third round picks. I mean, unless you were somehow able to get a second round pick and trying to do a Seattle thing with 3 or so picks in the top 50, it could really transform the draft. I don't know what the value is. I mean, the case to trade Herbig is expiring contract. He's not going to come back if he knows that Highsmith and Watt are the starters. He's going to pull a Bud Dupree and go somewhere else and get paid. So trade him now. The case for trading Highsmith is you want to re-sign Herbig. You want to keep him long term. You can't do all 3. So let's trade one of them now when the value is pretty high. That's the calculation on both those guys. My preference is you listen to offers, of course, but to trade neither and hold on to those guys. You can still evaluate this decision after the 26th season. If you want to roll with Herbig, you could do something with Highsmith and even potentially TJ Watt then and extend Herbig out if he walks and you play the comp pick game like they did with Bud Dupree. So I think for a team that still seemingly wants to win now, to a defense that structurally is going to be about the same, at least that's everything that Mike McCarthy and Patrick Graham has said. They're not going to make any big differences. They want to keep the defense intact. Doesn't really track with then trading one of those edge guys. So again, this was them listening to calls, not actively shopping or anything like that. And one executive predicting he'll be traded doesn't mean that that's going to happen. And there's been a lot of trade buzz on Highsmith before, and none of that's come to fruition. So we'll see. Certainly would shake up the draft quite a bit. My thought is that they should not be traded and that they will not be traded, but we'll just see how draft weekend looks.
Look, and I don't want to knock Charles Robinson. I think he's been around the league for a long time, has given a lot of great info over the years. I don't view him, though, as one of the more highly connected guys in the league. Now, obviously, if one of these two guys ends up getting traded, I'll have to offer an apology to him, and obviously kudos for calling it. But and then look, you would think if a team were seriously going to trade for Herbig, and even if it only cost them a third round pick, to do so. You would think that they would probably want to extend Herbig, and maybe there would be already some conversations, permission from the Steelers. Not, and that's not overly necessary because they could turn around, and if they did not get a deal worked out with Herbig, if they traded for him, they could turn around and watch him leave in free agency and probably get compensatory value for him for 2028 on top of it. But I mean, I would think at this stage of the game, if you're going to trade for a guy and give up, whether it be part of a first round trade up or trade down scenario for a team that's acquiring him, or a team that's just flat out, here's a third round pick for him, that you would want some sort of security that potentially you're going to have him more than one season, and you don't want to trade for a guy and then be in a situation where you already don't have a deal worked out for him, because it puts more of the leverage, it feels like, in the players sandbox, if you will, as far as that. But reading, at least from my reading of the tarot cards and how I think the Steelers would handle it, it would, if any trade once again comes about for either one of those two players, I envision it being some sort of move that gets the Steelers moved up into the first round.
Yeah, I know that when Pittsburgh traded Pickens last year, there was no extension from Dallas's end, but I think Dallas wanted to see how that year was going to go, how Pickens would mesh with the organization before committing big money to him, and Herbig is not that same concern. You would like to extend. I think you would do an extension with Herbig immediately if you traded for him. I think if Highsmith were to be traded, I think you turn around and lock up Herbig pretty much immediately as well. So it is just one report, like you said. It's not been corroborated by anybody else. Doesn't mean that's not true. We respect the work that Charles Robinson does, but we'll see what draft weekend brings, and we'll see if Omar Khan, Mike McCarthy get asked about that as well during their Monday pre-draft press conference. So anything else to discuss from the weekend slate of news, Dave?
Let's stay on kind of the trade topic, if you will. We talked a little to a lot about the whole Patrick Queen situation. I think if either one of us were betting on such a thing at this point, we would bet against, in other words, thinking that they're not going to trade Patrick Queen. We just had a conversation about Herbig and Highsmith, who are both outside linebackers. One thing that we haven't potentially discussed, what is the plausibility that this team might consider trading Peyton Wilson?
Ooh. I hadn't given it much thought. That's not my inclination with Queen on an expiring deal, and Malik Harrison expiring deal, Holcomb a cheap 2-year contract. I think you want to see it through with Wilson. I mean, I had my concerns about him, and I was disappointed this game did not take the step that I thought it would and hoped it would this time a year ago. But I'd be surprised if they pulled the plug on Peyton Wilson.
All right, let me phase it this way, just short and sweet. Of Highsmith, Herbig, Queen, and Wilson, which one would you put the best odds on the team trading if any of them were being traded?
Queen.
Were to be traded. Queen?
Queen.
Okay.
Who would you pick?
Yeah, I would probably go Queen as well.
Okay.
I think I might put Wilson second, to be honest with you.
Really? What is that? What is the reason?
I just wonder what they think of his future, and I could see how he would be attractive to a team maybe like the Cowboys per se, who evidently have been sniffing around inside linebacker. I think obviously the list of teams would be short that would want to trade for him. But I still, throughout this thing, just to kind of keep going back to these veteran connected Cowboys beat writers and parlaying it into some of the things that Jerry Jones has said, I just wonder if there's still, if we're going to look back at this and saying, well, there was that smoke at least there. And I just wanted to cover every aspect of it, especially off the ball inside linebacker, should indeed, one of them be traded by the Steelers, which at this, look, it's not going to be Malik Harrison. I think it'd be foolish for any team to trade for Malik Harrison. I don't think it's going to be Holcomb. I would think that of the candidates to be traded at inside linebacker would obviously be Queen or Peyton Wilson. I just wanted to cover all the bases there, just in case we're looking back at, well, there was smoke there, and why didn't we mention Peyton Wilson potentially on the short list there? Now, look, do I think any of them end up happening? Absolutely not. That's where I'm at right now. I do think, once again, though, if one were to be traded, it feels like it might be Queen, but there's been nothing really to go on since several weeks ago. All that smoke coming out.
Yeah, they paid the roster bonus and talks died down from there, but Dallas might try again depending on how the first round shakes out, if they can go acquire a Sonny Styles. Like if you traded Peyton Wilson, you would draft an inside linebacker, Jacob Rodriguez, and then probably have him, work alongside Queen this year and then maybe take over and be the guy if Queen hits free agency next offseason.
Right.
All right, Dave, let's get through some reader emails if we have any. And
real quick, your thoughts on Dexter Lawrence being traded from the Giants to the Bengals and then them turning around and giving him a new deal. I really thought once Dexter Lawrence started hollering that the Giants would take care of him and get something done with him. That obviously wasn't the case. Of all teams for them to trade him to, and then for a team to turn around and give him a contract, I would have probably never picked the Bengals within that. But I do understand that move on the Bengals end. I think now that gives the Giants the 5th and the 10th pick overall. What direction might they go that by? And look, the list of great defensive tackles at the top end of this class isn't great, so I certainly understand why the Bengals did that. What does that do, if anything, to the Steelers draft process because of having a very reputable all-pro type player with Lawrence landing in the AFC North?
Yeah, it makes you really want to make sure that interior offensive line is as good as possible because you're facing a really good player when he's healthy and playing his best in Dexter Lawrence. The tape and the production certainly waned last year, but remember 2 years ago, facing him against the Giants, you had your backup center and you had McCollum in that game because Frazier had the ankle sprain. You had to really concentrate on him. So I assume the Bengals' motivation was, as you said, the interior D-line class is really bad. It might be the worst position group of any position group in this year's draft. There just aren't many guys, not many impact players, and so that certainly is a big reason why Cincinnati wanted to make this deal. They weren't going to find a D-tackle as good as Lawrence in the draft, and they're frustrated by their defense being terrible year after year, and they tried draft picks, and they've not worked out. Let's go get a proven guy, but I was surprised to see number 10 pick for Lawrence. He's getting closer to 30, had the elbow issue, production ticked down last year. You got to pay him as well. That's a pretty high price to pay. And the Bengals never make that type of move, even more rare than Pittsburgh, to make this level of aggression and aggressive move. So it was surprising, but you got to contend with Lawrence now twice a year, and that will not be easy.
Who got the better end of who got the better end of that deal? Off the
Giants. The Giants.
I think the Bengals did.
Okay. Well, you weren't surprised by 10th overall?
No, I was surprised you got traded, period. But after the fact, I mean, the Bengals have, they got to get that defense right with all the talent that they have. If they want to compete in 2026, they got to. There's a lot of holes in that defense that they got to get filled up, and obviously defensive line was one of those, and they've obviously solved that now at this point. They obviously didn't like the group of players that they were perceived to be available to them at that spot. So why not go ahead and make that deal and essentially. I mean, you got a veteran guy, obviously with some years on him, but at least a guy that's an instant impact. And I'm not sure you would have got that, especially on the defensive line, and really any position overall, first round at that spot there, had they not done that. So I would tend to give the edge here to the Bengals in that deal because I think it's an instant fix for them on a side of the football that's really needy and a position of need as well too.
Yeah, that's fair. And the Ravens lose Linderbaum, and so they're hurting down the middle. And I'm sure the Bengals with Lawrence can certainly try to take advantage of that. And winning a division is where this thing starts. So I get why the Bengals did it. It just felt like the cost with the pick and having to pay him was too much. But they're in win now mode. They want Burrow to get back to the playoffs. Burrow himself has been frustrated by the lack of success, so I'm sure he's happy to see this aggressive move. So I get it. It's a heavy price to pay.
All right. Now we shall get to some reader emails here, I guess, or listener emails. Let's see. Chris Warren. Sorry, guys, forgot to pass along the second question. What do you think is the likelihood that the Steelers are high on either Tyson or Cooper, but are being careful not to tip their hand? I just don't view the Steelers as giving a crap about what's known, because look, it's easy to connect the dots on the other two, on the two specifically that he named in Jordan Tyson and Cooper, because and I'm sure other teams see that. Look, the connection to Tyson is obviously Hines Ward there, and then the connection to Cooper that we've talked about several times with the new wide receivers coach and Signetti and all like that. I don't view, should either one of those two be the pick, I'm not viewing it as them being, well, we wanted to purposely not bring either one of these guys in for a pre-draft visit because of potentially tipping our hand that way. I just think that if they're high on either one of those two guys, they had enough intel on them anyway, and thus, once again, the fact that the Steelers are and and it has been the case for numerous years now, they don't seem to give a crap about other teams knowing who they bring in for visits or where they show up at pro days or any of that stuff. So my gut is that this is not a being careful to tip their hand type situation.
Yeah, that's my thought. I think you framed it well. If they do go against history, quote unquote, and take one of those two guys, it's not because they were trying to play some sort of 4D chess move to hide our interest. It's just they knew about those guys. They didn't need to bring them in, and they didn't need to do the homework that they would have had to on others they were less familiar with because of the connections to Hines Ward and to Frank Signetti Jr. and to Adam Henry in Cooper's case. Even though this wasn't first round, I think back to Juju in 2017, second round pick. You only talked to him at the combine. They had one combine meeting, and that was it per Juju. And that was partially because Lynn Swann was, I think, the AD at USC. He was in the athletic department. And so they kind of had some intel on Swann's end. And you kind of could do the same with Tyson or Omar Cooper Jr. that would not require a pre-draft visit or extensive face-to-face meeting before the draft. So it'll go against history. But if it does, as you said, I don't think it's for smokescreen purposes. It's just they knew enough. They didn't have to do the additional work.
All right. Let's see here. Who else do we have in here? Arthur Elliott says, looking at the pre-draft visit list, would appear the Steelers are strongly looking for one of Lemon, Vega, or Fano to fall to 21. But if they don't, they have done a lot of homework on later round one guys. I'd say if those three are gone, they try and fall back for 2027 capital. What do you think about that? Also, should we be looking more at Christian Miller? Who's he talking
D lineman from Georgia?
Yeah. Yeah, he says, do you think they should be looking more at Christian Miller as a potential first round guy if all those guys are gone?
Yeah, Miller in the first round feels a little strong. I like Miller. I don't know, first round, it seems like a stretch based on his projection. If he's there in the second round, though, at 53, that gets interesting.
All right. And what do you think about the first part of the question there?
Can you repeat the first part of the question?
They've done a lot of homework on the later. He says if those three are gone in Vega, Lemon, or Fano, they try to go back for 2027 capital. What do you think of the likelihood that they get 2027 capital as reason to fall back from 21 overall?
It's going to be tough. It's going to require a trade down of a decent magnitude. I've posited the scenario Buffalo, where I think that makes a lot of sense to fall down 5 spots, and Buffalo doesn't care about the quarterback class nearly as much as quarterback needy teams next year. So maybe that's a scenario, but it's hard to get that to fit right on the fly. So it would seem doubtful, but you never know when it comes to trades.
All right, Brett, now, as usual, has a lengthy one in here. I'll try to get through this as quickly as possible. Brett, try to shorten these up, if you will, going forward. I was listening to the podcast and your discussion about drafting a quarterback. I'm not excited about it, but I do feel compelled to put forth the devil's argument in favor of drafting a quarterback. He says, number one, it ain't over till it's over. We all think Rodgers will sign, but until that's official, you still only have two quarterbacks on the roster. He says number two, 4-4-4. This team always takes four quarterbacks into training camp. Shouldn't it be the best four? He says, as Dave is fond of saying, these things have a funny way of working out. This team always carries three quarterbacks on the roster between game day and active and injured list. There's room for four if there are four good ones. Number three, the dirty dozen. He says, when you have 12 draft picks, you should be taking shots. Number four, it's on sale. A lot of people have looked at what happened to this quarterback draft as a bad thing. However, it could also be the opportunity. Be an opportunity. Had Nussmeier, Al Allard, or Beck come out last year, 2 years ago for Beck, they would have been drafted much higher, likely all first-round picks. If you believe in the evaluation from 2024 or earlier, doesn't that mean that you get those players on sale? Wait until next year is number five. I believe the only quarterback you have under contract in 2027 is Will Howard. If you can carry a drafted quarterback through till next year, there's a place on the roster going forward. And then number six, he says, Dave says, in previous years and talking about other teams, Dave has said something to the effect of, if you don't have a quarterback, you should draft one every year till you get one. You never know what you might get. You might get a Brock Purdy or even a Kirk Cousins, etc. If you have extra picks, why not buy the lottery ticket? So what do you think about all that and parlaying it into reasons why this team should draft a quarterback this year?
Yeah, I get the case. If you got him, smoke him, or whatever the saying is. And so that's the thought on all the draft picks, and it's such an important position. But if there's not a guy, there's not a guy. And if you don't know exactly how the pieces are going to fit, like what's that fourth rounder going to do for you? You're still going to be in the quarterback waters next year, you would assume, unless something dramatically changes in 26. So I get the rationale, and I know Pittsburgh's doing their homework, but it's just, is that going to really change 27 plans to take a fourth round quarterback who probably does not see the field as a rookie? I don't know if that's a super compelling argument, but I get the overall point.
Look, I have, definitely was wrong going into the offseason here, thinking about the Steelers potentially drafting a quarterback, and it started with Beck coming in, and obviously the list growing from there. I have done a complete 180 as far as thinking they will draft a quarterback. I think they will. I don't. We'll obviously see if and when they do draft one, and how many picks they end up making will play into it. I know he emphasizes that this team has 12 picks. I guess I would ask Brett as a rebuttal question is do you think the Steelers will actually use all 12 picks? Do you think they'll end up using 9? Do you think they'll end up going fewer than that? And is it still worth taking a flyer on the position if indeed, let's say they make as few as 9 picks overall? I get it. The way this thing looks like it's headed right now, I don't 100% agree on it. It will be interesting to see once the dust settles who that player is, if indeed there is a quarterback, what round, what else was taken on either side of him, all the things that go along with looking in the rearview mirror as far as quarterbacks. And yeah, look, in the past, I have said, keep drafting quarterbacks until you have a franchise quarterback. And obviously right now, it does not look like this team has a franchise quarterback. I do wonder, though, if 4 is one too many, even though one of the other things that I say is all these things have a funny way of working themselves out on top of it here. So I'm very conflicted on the quarterback situation, going into this offseason here, as opposed to the way I have been. And look, without a doubt, if this team comes out after the draft and says, look, we drafted Carson Beck, for example, because we think we like his pocket passing prowess, we like his upside, we need we need another one in that room, and there's going to be a competition, and who knows, maybe they trade Mason Rudolph. If this team drafted any quarterback in round 3 or on, could we see Mason Rudolph shipped out, as part of a move up, maybe in a later round to a team that needs a backup quarterback? Is that plausible? And then will we be going, oh yeah, I get it now. But then once again we go back to what I've said. Man, can you really envision this team going into the season, assuming Aaron Rodgers comes back, with 2 essential rookie quarterbacks backing them up? And is that a good strategy?
Well, if they traded Mason, we would definitely have that reaction. It always makes sense after the trade. The clarity's always there, Dave. But I don't expect that to happen during the draft, because you want these guys to go into camp and to prove it. You would move Mason in the summer because Howard's had a good summer. The rookies played well. You feel good about what those guys have done on the field with some tangible evidence in their NFL careers. You wouldn't do that during the draft. And it's not going to move the needle too much. Mason would have value. He has a little bit of trade value, but it would be someone loses a backup quarterback in the summer. Somebody goes down, gets hurt, some situation changes where now they're looking for a backup quarterback. That happens pretty commonly each year, and that's where Mason could be traded in August.
All right, we'll take one more here from Grant Kinney. He says, hey, Dave and Ox, you guys do such a phenomenal job, and we fans so appreciate it. As someone who will be hearing the Steelers pick live, I would be very happy to hear either Fano or Vega, especially if they don't have to trade up to get one of them. That's my ideal. He says, I've been playing out different scenarios in my head and wanted to get your thoughts. If it is Vega or Fano, what's the answer at wide receiver if Bernard is gone in the second? He seems to go somewhere around, if not before the Steelers pick. Do you want another round for wide receiver, or do you wait another round for wide receiver and address another position? On the flip side, if they have to go Cooper or something else in the first because Fano, Vega are gone, where does that leave you for O-line in the second? Guys like Rutledge sound like they will be gone, assuming no trades in any of this. Thoughts? Grant, I think the best answer potentially to that is just look at the pre-draft visitor tracker and where some of these guys, at least what we think, what rounds they will potentially go in. I think the question posed about if they don't go wide receiver in round 1 and for some reason don't get Bernard in round 2 is probably the most interesting scenario overall based on at least the pre-draft visitor look. Could you see this team probably waiting a round or 2 for a wide receiver, maybe a Skylar Bell who they brought in, Jeff Caldwell who's supposed to go later, should they not get a wide receiver, or could we see kind of a surprise second rounder in there? Let's say a Surratt still on the board, or it is an interesting question that if this team does not go wide receiver in round 1, and if for whatever reason Bernard and let's say Boston slides to the second round and he's gobbled up quickly, what way they would go? Would they reach for a wide receiver at that point in the second round, or would they just wait for the board to come for them? So I think that's probably, of everything that he just asked, I think that's the most interesting question.
Yeah, I feel that. I feel like in most mock drafts that don't go receiver round 1, Bernard gets slotted in round 2. Most mock drafts don't go guard round 1. They go with Rutledge in round 2. We kind of get stuck in those ways and don't think about what if they're not there and kind of pin your hopes on the one guy being there, which is certainly no guarantee. So it's an interesting question. I'll give you one name at receiver that I kicked around round 2. Ted Hurst from Georgia State didn't come in for a visit, but they were at that pro day. Sheldon White went, which is pretty notable when the director of scouting, director of pro scouting, attends for and clearly they went for Ted Hurst. They didn't go for any other Georgia State kid. All due respect to the others working out. And so I think that's interesting. He had a good Senior Bowl week. He's got size that McCarthy looks for. So I don't sleep on Ted Hurst as an option in the second round if receiver's not the pick in round number 1. Guard gets trickier because I think you're right. I think Rutledge could easily be gone. A lot of reports. Bisontis from Texas A&M's gotten a ton of buzz. Even a report from Tony Pauline that Pittsburgh may consider him at number 21. I know we're in draft smokescreen season at its peak right now, so who the heck knows, but I doubt he'll be there at 53. I think it's interesting in terms of the guard prospects. You look at a Bo Stevens from Iowa, like Billy Shrouth from Notre Dame, but the medical might kick him to day 3. You look at a tackle convert that might kick inside, a Cage Casey from Boise State, Jennings Dunker from Iowa, somebody else that might fit that mold. So I think it gets a little bit murkier on guard day 2, but yeah, it's a fair point. You can't pin your hopes on that one guy being there because he may not.
I would add on to assuming that they did not go wide receiver in round 1, and if Bernard and or Boston are both off the board at that point, and if they felt it was way too early for a Skylar Bell or a Chris Brazel out of Tennessee, or even maybe a Stribling, who I think Stribling is more of probably a second round guy. Go back to your what they look for list. Could Antonio Williams be sitting there, a full box checker, at least when it comes to athletic profile the study that you did? I mean, that's the name that I think jumps off the list of wide receivers in round 2 if a guy like Bernard is gone. And then I probably have him ranked higher than most, but what about Bryce Lance out of North Dakota State? I think a lot of people have him as a 3rd or 4th round guy, but what if the board, what if Hurst is off the board and maybe you weren't that high on Surratt, maybe Stribling's off the board. You're stuck there at 53, can't move anywhere. Would Bryce Lance be the worst pick that you could see this team make? I probably should have added him to my crush list earlier when talking in the roundtable there, because I think he's very talented, and I think he's a guy that's not gotten as much buzz as probably I think that he deserves. I could really see Bryce Lance being a pick somewhere in the 2nd round of this year's draft, despite people having a 3rd or 4th round grade on him, specifically when you look at kind of the youthfulness, I guess, overall of this class, experience-wise, and guys that have made a lot of contributions in the college level. So best answer I could give to him is, if you got in that situation without Bernard, perhaps this team will look at Williams. Alex mentioned Hurst, and then I would throw out probably Bryce Lance as a potential option there.
Yeah, those are all good names. I like Antonio Williams and not. Who was it in the roundtable that had the big crush on him? I forget if that was Ryan or Jake or who said Antonio Williams. Maybe Jim. It might have been Jim Hester. But yeah, good prospect there. So, and I know they looked at Cole Payton quite a bit. And if you watch Cole Payton film, who shows up all the time? Of course, his teammate, his receiver, Bryce Lance.
All right. Okay, we got through some questions there. We're about the 2-hour mark, I think, for the show, and that included a fantastic roundtable. Make sure I'll try to put the Twitter usernames, handles for all the guys in the roundtable. If you're not already following them, please do. I'd like to get some feedback as well, too, from the listeners ahead of the draft. Alex and I will now start getting ready for Omar Khan and Mike McCarthy press conference. We will be back on Tuesday morning to recap that, along with whatever else news surfaces between there. And then obviously this is mock draft week as well too. Final mock draft, final versions. Alex and I will be posting our final ones in the coming days on top of it there. So plenty of stuff to read on SteelersDepot.com in the meantime. But once again, Alex and I will be back on Tuesday and then Wednesday as well, as we get ready for the 2026 NFL draft. So you can follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate, SteelersDepot.com, hit the donate button. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com, hit the ad-free button, follow the directions that way, and get yourself a username and password for the ad-free version of SteelersDepot.com. So, great show today, and let's do it again on Tuesday morning, Alex. And until then, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.